I'm Mayoshi Moses. I'm the Vice President of Volunteer Programs at the AARP Foundation. And the mission of our foundation is to end senior poverty by strengthening the resilience of older adults for and with older adults. And so I am privileged to lead two national programs. One is called TaxAid, which is the largest free volunteer-powered tax preparation program in the country. We have more than 29,000 volunteers who annually certify to prepare taxes every tax season. And our other program is Experience Corps, which is an intergenerational literacy tutoring program that serves kids kindergarten through third grade. So I'm really excited about this panel because we've been hearing about today about service and connection and the value of service. But we have a different focus today with this panel, really looking at how service impacts and how it looks different across generations. I think it's really powerful when you think about people performing service and doing acts of service at different stages in their life, what happens when those experiences intersect? And so that's what we'll be talking about today. I'm really excited with our panel. I will have you to introduce yourselves, but I'll start with you, Vanessa. Introduce yourself and then tell us why does service matter and what does it mean to you personally?
Well, good afternoon, and yes, thank you for coming back from lunch. I'll start with the why, because that's what Simon Sinek said we're supposed to do, right? I always start with why. Service for me is about showing up. It's about being human and trying to make the world what you and your community want it to be, right? In essence, we all want the world to be a beautiful place for ourselves, for our children, for our families, and I think service is kind of putting that into action. And has always been my whole career has been focused on volunteerism and service. So I've just a quick snapshot, I was in AmeriCorps and I did service learning in universities and had a big focus on youth engagement. And now work at Points of Light as the Chief Program Officer. So it's like the dream job of being able to think about the field as a whole. What does it look like to really try to curate and support? And someone said earlier the word infrastructure, and I lost my mind. I wanted to start cheering and throwing confetti. But what does it look like for us to really build a world where people can take action? And so that's kind of what it means to me, but also what I've been focused on for my career. So I'm really excited to be here with all of these people and people online that are really thinking every day about what does it mean for us to really build and invest in this infrastructure.
Tay.
Yes,
what does it matter to you?
Yes, well, thanks, Mayoshi. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Vanessa, such profound leaders. I guess I'll start. My name's Tay Moore. I'm a research and policy associate for the Aspen Institute in the Education and Society program. As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm not a D.C. native. I was born and raised in Ringo, Louisiana. I'm a small town in northwest Louisiana. And I tell you what service means to me. It reminds me of my great-great-great-grandmother, Edith Rambo, who was a midwife, the daughter of slaves, and traveled across Louisiana in the South, delivering over 5,000 babies. And oftentimes, since black individuals in our area didn't have access to health care, and the same for poor whites too, they couldn't pay her with money, and so they paid her with land. And Edith donated a parcel of that land to start the first school for black children in the town that I grew up in. That's what service means to me. It's my great-grandmother who I watched and helped take care of my great-grandfather, who was a double amputee, and devoted her life, to caring for him. It's the 4 generations of black men who served in the armed services here in the United States, including my dad and my older brother. Some of those generations of which returned to America and were still treated like second-class citizens. It's that, it's my church community that I grew up in that delivered food to folks, when they're bereaving, and created programs for young people in our community. My mom and so many others, who returned from their home, their jobs. Many of them being educators working at the school, and went home and made dinner not only for our family, but countless others in our community who had just been dealt a bad lot in life. It's my pastor here is here from the church I go to in D.C. It's the group of men who got together last night. There's a group of us who have started a nonprofit wing of our church and are partnering with the Boys and Girls Club and the police department in District 2 and simply uplifting and investing in the lives of young people in the community and letting them know that they have the potential to be the leaders of tomorrow. Service, and I say all that to say, not to, give you a snapshot or a track record, but to hone in on what one of the speakers mentioned earlier. Service is not an activity. It's a way of life. And it's a vocation, thankfully, that everyone has the opportunity to be a part of, no matter what our lot in life is or what position we find ourselves in society.
I love that. I love that. And what I'm hearing is, yes, absolutely. That's beautiful. Hearing about the impact of service has had on your lives and the connections that are being built. What is it about volunteering that creates connection between people, and what's different when that connection happens across generations? Let's go to you,
Okay.
Vanessa.
I really feel like people have talked about this a lot today. Shared connection happens when you have shared purpose. And I know there's a lot of research here. I'm not sure if more In Common people are here or the Trust for Civic Life. Every time they put a report out, I jump on it because there's so much kind of, when you think you know things and you see things in the world, and then your amazing researchers that come out and tell us, what is what. But More in Common has been putting out a lot of work lately about the fact that bridging and bonding and connection, yes, that happens. It happens when you talk to your neighbor down the street. It happens when you have potlucks or you run into people at coffee shops. But the research and real life is telling us that it happens and is sustainable and durable when you have shared action and when you are guided towards a common goal. And when we think about America's 250 and we think about the work that we are all curating, it is about that common goal. What does it mean to be the people? What does it mean to be engaged and be a part of the community? For me, it's the a part of. And when you can do something side by side with someone, you could be planting a tree with someone you've never met before, and you figure out you have the same interest in music, and all of a sudden you start talking about something. We ran a program for a while. I live in Richmond, Virginia. We ran a program for a while, and it was when people were learning about the James River, right? This river runs right through our city. It is the heartbeat of Richmond, Virginia. And we ran this program called Teamworks, and we had individuals from all over, all ages, volunteer together over an 8-week period at different parts of the river and learn a little bit of, local lore of the river, a little bit of the environmental impact. But they also just got to spend time together and share stories, and they had little potlucks together. And then 2 years later, a woman who was actually an AmeriCorps member in our office was like, oh, so-and-so volunteer is going to be my officiant. He's been mentoring me for the last 3 years. And you realize you have these moments of connection that can really leap forward and help you with your career. It can help you with your family, with your life. And I just truly believe that those connections are important because we're heading somewhere together. And hopefully we're heading to a place where everybody can thrive, kind of that beautiful world we're looking for.
Tay, do you have any examples of connections across generations?
Yes, and I guess I'll frame this whole thing by saying that these connections across generations enrich our understanding of the world around us. I can remember being a college student at LSU, and I was very involved in the Engaged Citizen program. One of the pillars of the land-grant university system is extension, this idea that everything we learn in university is to solve the problems in our communities, particularly the problems of rural America, which is, a part of the country that I care about deeply. And I was taking this class that focused on social policy and had to pair it with a service learning experience that I did throughout the semester. And so spent some months volunteering at St. Vincent de Paul homeless shelter. And I'll never forget, I was volunteering there one day, and there was an older gentleman that was volunteering alongside me, and his entire career had been as a dentist, particularly a dentist in penitentiaries across the state. And so obviously he had this wisdom and nuance, to his volunteer service. And these group of men walk in one day, and we were serving lunch, and I saw that they had a uniform on that was a uniform of a public service entity, might I say, in the region, in that city. And I looked over at him and I said, well, that's so nice that this institution donated those uniforms for these men, who are homeless to be able to wear since it's cold outside. And he looked at me and he said, Tay, those men work there. And it dawned on me that there were individuals who worked full-time jobs in public service careers who still didn't have enough money to pay for lunch, to also meet the needs of their family. And so every time those experiences I had, like that, another experience where taking an education policy class, I tutored some students at a nearby elementary school not too far away from LSU's campus, a school that I would say was in a building that was probably from the pre-integration era in one of the most wealthy neighborhoods in Baton Rouge. And I noticed the stark disparity there between the facilities of this building and the private Catholic school that was right behind it that only was separated by a chain link fence. And I realized, that this idea that I had of how urban areas were seen as these epicenters of opportunity struggled with a lot of the same problems that we saw in rural America. So when you talk about the rural-urban divide, we're actually a lot more similar than we think we are. And I say all that to say that this connection and serving across the generations allows us to truly understand that the problems we go through are not, our own issues. These are issues that other people go through as well. But also when we think about our educational experience and policy solutions, we have more empathy and understand the structural forces at play. And so we're not just any longer as college students sitting in a class learning about things, but actually seeing how that's impacted on the ground, and it's so much more influenced and enriched my educational experience.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Volunteerism is not just an act of service. You look at and see how the impact that happens with people as part of this process and what's happening at that time. We've been talking about individuals and the impact of service and volunteerism on individuals. I like to zoom out and think about how volunteerism makes things possible for communities. How are you seeing volunteering make a difference at the community level? And where does intergenerational engagement strengthen that impact? I'll start with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, this whole notion of young people and adults working together to solve community issues, if we look at American history, it's not a new thing. A lot of my college time, I studied the civil rights movement particularly, and we'll see, a main part of that and a pillar of it was that these young folks, although those photos are in black and white, they were really young. They were my age or younger than 30. They put their lives on the line, but also had the wisdom of the older generation guiding them. And that continues today. We see this across many of our programs at the Aspen Institute and the work that we're supporting with young people who are stepping up in their community, identifying community solutions, and then doing something about it. For instance, there's a young lady in New York that, we realized this technological advancement that's happening, and so many elders in the community are being left behind. So she rallied together a group of her friends, and every week they host these sessions of these young people teaching older members of their community how to use technology. And while they're bridging this technological divide, they're also bridging the generational gap there. Two demographics, young people and the elderly, that studies show are most likely to experience this loneliness, a lack of purpose. Well, how much community transformation can happen when we put those two communities together? And what's the bridge that gaps what's the bridge over that divide? Service. And we see this happen not only in New York, but across so many communities in the country.
I'll take that technology volunteer. It would be amazing if they could help me sync all my calendars up. For me, one of the things that we're thinking about right now at Points of Light, we are a week away from releasing, this is going to get a little technical, but 2 theories of change for the field. One for our organization, Points of Light, what are we doing in the world and why and what does it matter? But we've also been working over the last year to think about a theory of change for volunteerism, for the field, to really offer up for the field to be able to use it as a way to kind of frame our programming. And one of the things that we've really talked about is where the different levels of impact. And I think that for me is the key conversation that we've been having here today is there is not one singular benefit. There is not one singular entity. This is an ecosystem. There's multiple reasons that people volunteer, motivations. There's multiple things that people get out of it. It could be a career path. It could be connection. It could be learning an issue. It could be learning a new skill. It could be finding your way in a new community. There's so many things. And what I don't ever want to do is, pigeonhole why people volunteer or what happens in the nonprofit sector, because this is a multifaceted experience that we all get to, participate in. But the focus that we've been thinking a lot about is the fact that there is impact to individuals, there are impact to nonprofits, and the capacity building that was talked about earlier. You know, half the people in the nonprofits are unpaid volunteers. We would not be able to achieve mission if we didn't have volunteers integrated into our community-based organizations. And then there's the larger societal things, which we have talked a little bit about, but this is about democracy. This is about living in society together. So individuals have a sense of connection and belonging and learning. Nonprofits and communities are able to use human ingenuity and skills and time and talent to meet the mission, meet the needs of their community. And then when we weave and kind of pull all that together, that's really when we get to that kind of society level about what does it mean for us to interact and work, collectively towards something. So I like to kind of think of that stack from individual to community to society, and really that through line is, how we all show up for each other.
At the foundation, we call that a triple win.
Triple win. I will take a triple win.
The volunteer benefits, the individual participant benefits, and we uplift the community through the trust built by the service that we're providing. Triple win.
Triple whammy.
I want to go deeper on this concept of intergenerational service. And I want to start with you again, Tay. What's getting people excited to step into service today? And how do younger generations experience working alongside older adults?
Yes, I will say that I believe the current generation, I love what the last speaker mentioned about how our generation, we're not the leaders of tomorrow, we're the leaders right now. And so this current rising generations, as we like to call them at Aspen, are not satisfied with maintaining the status quo. They see issues around them, and they realize that sometimes, our political systems or policies take a long time to make a difference. And so what are we going to do? We're just going to sit around and talk about what's wrong with the world, or are we just going to get up and do something? And we see this happening with so many young people here in the country. I'm thinking, my mind goes to a young man. That's one of the young people we invest in through our programs now with this Center for Rising Generations, who's based out of rural Maine and is very passionate about the gambling issue among young men. And so it started this local social media advocacy campaign to uplift this as an issue, but also is recruiting older men to help mentor these young men. What better benefit can we have on society than that? A lot of my background was being involved in the 4-H program, and 4-H is the largest positive youth development organization in the country. And the first pillar of positive youth development is the truth that every young person needs a caring adult mentor in their life. So the success of young people and the success of the future of our democracy depends not on just young people making a difference, but older generations standing in the gap for them and helping guide them along the way.
Absolutely. So Vanessa, I just want to take a moment. That was beautiful, and this is what we see at the foundation. But I want to go to you, Vanessa. What are you seeing about how different generations show up to service and what becomes possible when they engage together?
I would say when you meet one person, you meet one person. And often when we talk about young people, they often want the same things that I want or the same things that my parents want. And I think that's meaningful action and its purpose and its connection. And yes, there's going to be different ways we do that. And we know through research that many young people want episodic or shorter term volunteer opportunities, or that they care about the purpose or the issue, not the organization. Their sense of trust and loyalty is not to institutions, it's to the causes and the things that they're interested in. And that service might come through formal volunteerism. It also might come through their purchase power. It also might come through, how they choose to show up online and have conversations with their friends and family. And so being really open to the fact that I think the way people want to show up and volunteer, depending on their age, is going to vary. I think a lot about the fact that when I had young kids in the house, I wasn't going to be able to volunteer unless that nonprofit organization was open to bringing youth into their organizations, was willing and able to engage my kids, my family, eye to eye, and not as an inconvenience, but as an asset, and that we had something to give and learn together. So I think as we think about technology and we think about access and infrastructure, all the things that the earlier speakers mentioned today, I think every single one of those pieces, no matter where you are in the generational life cycle, People want to be able to have easy access to show up. They want to understand the issues that matter to them, and they want to have like a sense of like that their time was well spent. And so I think the technology and the ways people show up, and whether they're showing up through school or faith or on their own or neighborhood, I think all of that, no matter where you are in that life cycle, we've got to be able to address every one of those kind of access points.
Yeah, and I think I love your point about these are assets, and it really ties to Tay's point about sort of standing in the gap, and it reminds me of one of our Experience Core program at the Foundation, where the literacy tutoring program, we start with academic support, providing reading skills to young people, but what really ends up happening is it evolves into something deeper, a relationship. There's this one example I always love. There was a tutor shared this story where a student shared their excitement about seeing the movie Encanto because it represented her experience, her lived experience. And she shared it with her tutor, and her tutor, who did not have a similar background, was interested, intrigued, and listened to her and to understand what was exciting for her. And so he ended up ultimately taking his grandchildren to see this movie. And the next time they met, he talked about it with her, and their relationship deepened by his being open to learning more as he's helping her become a better reader. I really think that's the power of this intergenerational connection. That's where the assets are. And so it always starts with outcomes, delivery of outcomes, but it can also result in sort of expansion of perspective. I want to move to our last question, which is really looking toward the future. We've been talking about today about 250 years of service, where we are, but we want to think about what's next. As we look ahead to the next 250 years, it's not just about why service matters, but how can we ensure that this work is sustainable? If we want more volunteerism and intergenerational connection at scale, what is one thing we need to build or strengthen in our service infrastructure? I'm saying your favorite words, Vanessa.
Favorite word.
It could be programs, policies. What do you think? I'll start with you, Vanessa.
Okay, so this is my favorite word. I think if you're going to build things that are durable and meant to last, you've got to invest in it. Just like, it sounds so simple, but you have to invest in it. And our field has been chronically underinvested in for a long time. We know that I think it's less than 0.5% of all philanthropic dollars is into the volunteer kind of service community. So the first thing we need to do, I think, is a rallying cry of culture. If we believe in this, if we believe it is important to show up and participate and be active in our communities and volunteer, we need to work to invest in the infrastructure. And that means supporting volunteer managers. Someone talked earlier about executive directors. For executive directors to have the information and understand what volunteers are bringing into their organization, not just the hours that they're saving, but the intellect, the time, having hundreds of people now understand your issue and be advocates and ambassadors for it out in the world because they have a better context for what's happening in the world and what social challenges are around them. We have got to think about kind of that culture of investment into the field, because when we want people to show up, if we have a big call to action, come, get involved, and we're not ready to intake people and make sure that they are looked in the eyes and welcomed into these organizations or into these communities, that their time isn't well spent, that they don't have the opportunity to learn and meet new people, they're going to walk away. And they're going to go do something else. I mean, there was research probably about 15 years ago that talked about kind of the leaky bucket. And at that time, it was like 4 out of 10 volunteers, I think, left because their time wasn't managed. And the research was telling us that they weren't showing up again, not just to that organization, but to volunteerism. They found other things to do. We don't want that. We want people to walk into community and feel valued. And so if you are out there and you're working for a nonprofit, figure out what it means to bring volunteers into your organization and support the technology and the training and the volunteer managers and the infrastructure, your volunteer centers in your home communities, to make sure that the culture of service that we are trying to build can be met and welcomed and engaged in a way that is meaningful. I'm super passionate about this.
Yes, I love your passion. I can feel it. What about you, Tay? What do you think is the one thing that is needed for service infrastructure?
Heavy emphasis on one. They know I'm going to probably list a list. I'm going to go through a list, which I probably will anyhow. I have the mic, so they shouldn't have given me the mic. I've got 2 minutes, thank you. The first one that I'd say would be to integrate service infrastructure across all sectors. And this goes beyond nonprofit, but also for-profit, building that muscle, but then especially our education system. And some of the speakers earlier spoke about this a bit with this integration of service learning components and hours, but I think we need to go beyond that. Service learning and this idea of finding a community solution and doing something about it can be integrated into every subject and every course in school. You can use geometry, the skills learned in geometry, and combine them with your shop class to go out and build birdhouses. You can use your English skills to write newsletters for the local homeless shelter. You can find creative ways. You can take your music classes and have students perform to the senior citizen homes in the area, or even teach music to the younger elementary schools that most times don't have access to music programs. We have to think outside the box about integrating service where it's not just this activity, but a lifelong muscle. The second thing I'll mention, which kind of ties to what you said about the infrastructure and the workforce itself, when we look at the history of this country, I'm not sure if many of you were able to see the Good Morning America segment yesterday that focused on Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And it alluded, most of the largest youth-serving organizations, 4-H Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, Scouts, started at the beginning of the 1900s because everyday Americans saw that there were crises among young people and said, we've got to do something about it. And here we are today standing in one of the same situations, but particularly for our young men and boys. We have to be very strategic and very intentional about not only uplifting the profession itself, but also putting out the rally cry that for us men in the building and us men watching online, we have a responsibility, an extreme responsibility to be the mentors and volunteer our time and effort to raise up the next generation of men. I think it was Frederick Douglass who wrote that quote, "It's easier to build strong children than to fix broken men." We've got to stand in that gap. And the last thing that I'll say, because now we've ran out of time, taking it out of the structure part, the systems level policy, and the community individually, we have to make sure that we have a heart posture of service. It was John Lewis, we had some John Lewis scholars earlier, in his book Across That Bridge, he wrote that the most important frontier to conquer in the fight for human dignity is the human heart. It was Martin Luther King that said, policy can change habits, but it cannot change your heart. That's where love comes in. And how do we build that love? By getting proximate, as Brian Stevenson would say, and really digging into the issues in our communities and, getting down and doing something about it and ensuring that we don't make volunteerism just a thing that makes us feel good. It has everything to do with us, but it's not about us, We have these giftings, these callings, these talents that we have to give out to the world that they can be passed on to the next generation, but also that they can make society a better place. And so we just have to make sure, that despite what policies and infrastructure and systems change we make, we've got to have a heart posture of service.
Wonderful.
I would follow Tay anywhere.
Exactly. I just want to say, please join me in thanking Vanessa Diamond, Tay Moore.
Thanks,
This is
John.
wonderful.